Everybody.
All right. So we're missing. Nope. I think Andrew's coming in. There's Mr. Kelly.
Okay, we have one more minute. I'm going to try this. Yuji Fusa. A huge. Okay, stop laughing, Jen. I can tell who's laughing.
Barbara is laughing the loudest.
What is the F? There is no C after the FU. So I'm really off put by this translator.
You mean you're offset by this?
I am offset by this. How about this? Peloponnesian Wars. Holy, it understood Peloponnesian Wars, but it doesn't know Uji Fusa.
That's it. The computer is racist.
Ekpukwa. Yeah, that's like the
Closed caption.
This could be bad.
What does that mean? That means a lot of words are going to show up at the bottom of the screen.
Oh, boy.
Can't see that.
how about this? Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude.
Shotgun for it now. It doesn't speak German.
Okay.
Oh boy. Entertainment value is going up.
Everyone's gonna wanna come to our.
Great.
Hey, Linda, Ray's real background looks like your virtual background.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
But mine's from Harry Potter.
all right, so we've got 21 attendees in panel. All right, it is 7 o'clock. Mr. Roberts, we good? All right. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to be focused on trying to speak. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our February 8th Town Council meeting. Tonight, we are streaming live as well as our phone call-in. For those of you participating at home, we are on Zoom. There's a hand to indicate if you have a question, you can raise your hand. Those of you on the phone, it's *6 to mute and unmute your phone. *9 will indicate that you're raising your hand. When called upon, please state your name and address for the town clerk. In addition, tonight we are also, for those of you that are, on the Zoom, we are closed caption, so there will be, you will see the words show up at the bottom of the screen. So we'll try to speak clearly and avoid any confusion. At this point, I'd like us to all rise for pledge allegiance and a moment of silence for men and women serving in harm's way. Allegiance to the
To
flag
the flag
of
of the United States of America.
Republic
Stands one nation.
indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Justice for all.
Thank you all. With the roll call.
Ms. Ujifusa?
Here.
Ms. Abbott?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton? Yeah, Mr. Sotomayor is here.
Skipped one,
I know.
but I'm here anyways.
Mr. Hamilton?
Muted.
Muted. Well, now I'm here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Aguirre?
Here. Paul. I do not have anything for the president's executive summary tonight. So with that, we'll turn over to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have tax vouchers, 2021 208-01 to 2021 208-04.
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on, we have our town administrator's report. Mr. Rayner.
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. With respect to COVID, today I'm just going to concentrate on the vaccine and the vaccine deployment. The town of Portsmouth has teamed with Raytheon Integrated Defense Systems to use its Providence building, which is located just off West Main Road, to serve as our COVID-19 vaccine point of dispensing clinic. The town plans to use the facility for the vaccination of Portsmouth residents. By state direction, those 75 years of age and older will be the first and only ones to receive the vaccine as soon as the vaccine becomes available in this next group. The state has announced that vaccine doses are expected to be available in mid to late February. Portsmouth is compiling a list of residents 75 years of age or older only. Anyone not within this age group cannot be considered at this time. This current sign-up program is not a registration for a vaccine appointment, but a means by which the Portsmouth eligibility team may contact residents to make an appointment when the vaccine doses become available. We will work from oldest to youngest in this age group. Signing up for the 75-year-old and older group is easy. It's all laid out on our website, but essentially you can email to vaccine@portsmouthri.com. You can leave a message or talk to the receptionist at our hotline at 643-0323, and that's open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Or starting tomorrow, you'll be able to fill out a link which will be published on our website. Although medical conditions may be a consideration, eligibility team members are not medical professionals. Consequently, we are not asking for or accepting requests for medical considerations. It is recognized that some residents will have transportation challenges. Ideally, a family member or a good friend can assist those with such a challenge. The Portsmouth eligibility team will work on a case-by-case basis to help those with transportation challenges. In the initial vaccination program, homebound candidates cannot be accommodated. Procedures for homebound personnel are being formulated at the state level. If you have already sent an email or spoke to a town hall staff member and they recorded your contact information, you have already been added to the eligibility list and you need not sign up again. No further action is required from you at this time. Once vaccine doses have been allocated and made available, we will contact those on the eligibility list to register you for a vaccine appointment. As of today, we anticipate it may take more than 2 months to vaccinate those 75 or older based on indications of how many vaccines we will receive per week. We are asking everyone to be patient. If another opportunity emerges for you to receive a first dose from another source, by all means, take advantage of that opportunity. Just let us know. This will all be published online and released to the press tomorrow. With regard to the state's COVID relief fund distribution, the state's anticipated COVID relief fund distribution has been revised again. The fiscal year 21 estimated total CRF distribution for Portsmouth has been revised upward to approximately $816,000. The documentation for this was submitted last week to Rhode Island Division of Municipal Finance in accordance with appropriate and authorized expenditures. And lastly, with regard to the Southeast New England program, SNEP, in December, I gave you a short update on the SNEP program and where we as a town stood with respect to our approved application for stormwater and watershed management assistance. The town requested assistance in developing a town-wide climate resiliency planning and financial strategy. An MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, describing work to be done between the town and SNEP is being developed and will be ready for your review at the next council meeting. The MOU will include details concerning the facilitated process with town officials to further refine and prioritize highest priority capital needs, a public workshop or shops, consultant services to work with municipal staff to provide cost estimates to include in the capital improvement plan, and leadership training with the town council to ensure their understanding and support for climate resiliency planning and financing. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Got a hand up. Ms. Morris? Got your hand up?
I did, thank you. I have a question for Mr. Rayner regarding his vaccination report. How many people did the town of Portsmouth vaccinate so far?
We received 90 vaccines.
You used all 90?
That's correct. I
Were,
actually think that they were able to get a few more vaccinations out of those vials. Right now, it's 10 shots per vial, but occasionally there is a little more vaccine. So it may be a few people more than 90.
okay, so somewhere a little bit more than 90 then.
Correct.
I know that there are some people who did receive this vaccine. Do you know how many citizens received the vaccine?
I didn't understand the question. Could you ask that one more time, sir?
Yes, sir. I understand that you expended all the vaccine, but I was curious how many citizens of the town received the vaccine? Do you know?
Those 90 shots were only for citizens of Portsmouth.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Was he looking for a total?
I think it's outside of the first responders. So the 90 were first citizens, and then we had first responder shots as well, which was separate.
Okay, well, that's the question, yeah. So we should be, at the end of last week, we should have completed shots for all the first responders, that's fire and police. That 90-shot program, that was an initial trial program initiated by the state. And if you recall, 2 weeks ago, we received word that those shots will be made available for Portsmouth and, of course, other communities throughout Rhode Island. Late on a Wednesday, we had to get a program up and running by that Monday. That Monday was a snow event, so those shots were postponed until that Wednesday, and we initiated and completed all those shots on Wednesday over a week. And now the real program, for lack of a better description, begins mid-February. We don't have the exact date. We're targeting just after Valentine's Day. And that's all dependent on the vaccines and the doses being distributed by the state. We have no control over it.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Moving on, we have resignations and appointments. We have 2 reappointments to the Portsmouth Conservation Commission.
Move to reappoint both Mr. McDade and Mrs. Harding.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And we have a reappointment to the Harbor Commission for Mr. David Garcia.
Move to reappoint David Garceau to the Harbor Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. On to old business, monthly finance report. Mr.
So, Maslowski. John, I don't know if
I was looking. Oh, yeah. Don, can you hear us?
that's okay, Mr. President, I can cover it.
All right.
Bottom line, this represents the December report. It's halfway through the year. Revenues are, as of the end of December, they were at 50%, which is slightly lower than the previous year at that point, 52%. Obviously, revenues are down a bit, but most of this, I believe, is attributed to the fact that we have not, at that point, started collecting any of the motor vehicle tax revenue. And expenditures were at 48%, less than a 50% completion of the year, but slightly higher than last year's 46%. And we can attribute that, I think, mostly to some overtime and COVID expenses for which we will be reimbursed for.
Thank you, Mr. Rand.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. And next, we have the road safety assessment on East Main Road. We have an update from Mr. Crosby.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, DOT completed their road safety assessment for East Main Road back in December, issued their final report back in December. In that report was organized around a series of 7 observations about the East Main Road corridor. 1, inadequate pedestrian facilities and accommodations. 2, high vehicle speeds. 3, inadequate bicycle accommodations. 4, access management. 5, inadequate signage. 6, signalized intersection modifications that DOT wanted to do. And 7, corridor-wide traffic flow improvements. Now, in the report, there is an implementation matrix that out of these 7 observations, they came up with there were 30 or 40, perhaps more, mitigation measures or recommendations that were organized into a implementation matrix with columns for time frame, preliminary cost, the status of that particular mitigation measure, who was going to be the lead, and so forth. And so I took a look at the matrix and concentrated on 2 things. 1, whether the town was the lead under the team lead column, whether the town was the lead, and secondly, the time frame. And I chose intermediate and near-term timeframes to look at. There was a total of 18 action items that, or 18 mitigation measures that fell into that category of either immediate or near-term timeframe, and the town leading or co-leading. And looking at the status column, I was able to put organize these 18 action items into 5 buckets, if you will. One was under the status column. One was Portsmouth was to take the lead, and that particular action item, is in progress. Number 2 was to be reviewed with town center design or East Main Road repaving. Now, there were 5 action items that sort of fit into this category. One was inventorying existing sidewalks, conducting or coordinating with RIPTA regarding bus stops and so forth. And so in discussions with DOT, I got some better guidance from them about it, and pointed out to them that the town center project didn't make much sense to do a lot of these 5 particular mitigation measures prior to the design of the town center project and or the repaving of East Main Road. For example, there was a measure in here about consolidating the driveways and curb cuts and so forth. So there were 5 of these action items that fit into that category that we would wait until either town center or East Main Road repaving came about. The next bucket was work that DOT is in progress right now. They have work order in place for doing 1, 2, and there were 4 of these action items that fit into that category. You'll see as part of the backup, I gave you a maintenance work order that is currently in progress with DOT and due to be completed, when do they say, this summer for the most part. New stop signs in many places, decommissioning the school zone signs on East Main Road, installing no standing at any time signs on East Main Road and so forth. So there's a whole series, you can see for yourself, there's a whole series of things that they have written work orders for, and they are currently in progress. The next bucket was not yet started by Portsmouth with the police department and my department, the planning department. And the last bucket was this consider developing a speed management action plan. I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. So in looking at these and the buckets they live in, it appears as though there are really 3 big things that we need to be doing right now that have not been, we're in progress or have not started yet. One is considering a parking / idling ordinance. There's a number of, there's a couple of action items in here that are not listed here that DOT put on the list. They have, for example, they wanted to put in place some sort of a limits on where truck delivery can stop in the middle of the road and do their deliveries, but it came to pass that the Portsmouth Police Department doesn't have any kind of a jurisdiction to be able to regulate that. So DOT is asking us to consider a ordinance which would allow that. And there was another action item in there, creating a stripe, doing striping for a don't block the box in intersections. And again, we don't have, the police don't have the jurisdiction to be able to write tickets for that. So we're asked to try and work on an ordinance to do that. I'm in the process of trying to find some examples and so forth, and I'll work with the town solicitor on and the police chief on getting that going. The second one is, and it's sort of not sort of, it is in development right now, is the Complete Streets initiative, and the third is this local speed management strategy. Now, I did not really understand what that was all about. I've met with DOT since the report was issued, and got a little bit better sense of what this is all about. And I have some examples of it, and I'll get with the police chief and we'll get this started. I can read to you, if you like, a summary of what a speed management action plan is a strategy that addresses the concern of unlawful and undesirable speeds at a specific location along a corridor or within a jurisdiction's road network. The program should be comprehensive, addressing all factors that influence speeding, public awareness, user behavior, roadway design, surrounding land uses, traffic conditions, posted speed limits, and enforcement. Therefore, the program should encompass engineering, enforcement, education, and emergency services, known as the 4 E's of safety, when appropriate. So I have a template, if you will, or a process, if you will, that I intend to get with the police chief and start putting something like that together. So that's where we are. There's a number of things which are in progress, both by us and by DOT. There's a number of things that are going to be put off until we have the town center and the East Main Road repaving projects imminent. And we have, like I said, these 3 things that we need to either continue to work on or get started in the first place. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. If we have questions, there's some hands up. Did you or
I just wanted to some comments that a constituent submitted.
okay?
All right. This person said that on page 11, section 1.15, she believes that there needs to be a high intensity crosswalk at the new crosswalk across from Century 21. She said that that crosswalk is not visible at night. And if you look at the speed report, people are going 48 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone, which does not leave a lot of time to stop for a pedestrian. And that has to be done ASAP, not in 2 years. She believes that this report was done before the installation of that crosswalk. And because it's not visible right now, until you're right at the crosswalk, she believes there should be high intensity signal there. And the second point she wanted to make was that she thinks that we should replace all worn signs, especially at Headley, westbound, because it's badly faded. And the third comment is that she would suggest we clean off shoulders of sand debris for ripped riders. The sand is so high, a rider could trip or fall on the road because shoulders are unstable. The shoulder should not be higher than the curb. at least have the shoulders cleaned at the RIPTA bus pickup signs. So those would be three things that we would, I believe she thinks that RIDOT should add to the priority things. And then she would also suggest that we ask our federal delegation, Senators Reid and Whitehouse, for the I guess, a $200,000 road assessment for Middletown, Portsmouth, and Newport, for both West and East Main Road. This quote, "Never hurts to ask." Thank you very much.
Can you tell me, can you repeat the item about the Headley Street signs, please?
Just that to replace all worn stop signs, because the westbound Headley sign is badly faded.
Okay. Okay, I will relate these to DOT.
That might be on their sign list, Gary.
I believe it, I believe it is, yeah, but I will make sure of that.
It's one that we will have to we can follow up with, as well as the high intensity crosswalk. I believe they did review that, and we can go back into the report and look at that and maybe follow up with DOT. But I believe they did review those high intensity crosswalks. So we can follow up.
Mr. President, I thought they had agreed to put that in there, and it could just be still in process, and they're not finished with the project yet. We should follow up to make sure.
Yeah, I believe that is the case. I thought that was one of their measures that were going to be implemented when they were going to start the road paving, which might be that one that's, a year or two down the road. But I think we can follow up with that.
Just something as simple as solar powered activated flashing lights that let people know that somebody's going to be crossing the street in a second.
Yeah.
So they can see them.
You have a question?
I have a question.
Sure.
Mr. Chris, when will the town center project and the road repaving be imminent?
I think the East Main Road repaving is 2023. I'll go back and look and make sure. Town Center project is not going to be, the design for it. As you know, they came back to us quite some time ago now and said that the Town Center project was really was too expensive, and they really wanted to downsize. And they wanted to discuss with us our priorities for that. And we left the meeting, we gave them our priorities of pedestrian safety, traffic calming, and the reduction of congestion as our three top priorities for the project. We left that meeting, which was in 2017, I think. With the notion that they would, when they came back to redesign the project, that they would come back to us and we would be collaborators in the design of that project. They have, at that time, since then, they have changed their structure a little bit to where they're not designing. They're not doing they're sort of doing just-in-time design work now with their projects. And so we expect them to come back to us in 22, 23 to begin the process of redesigning Town Center.
Okay, thank you.
I will find out about the East Main Road. I have it here someplace, but I just don't have the date off the top of my head.
I know that, and this is just a comment to reiterate things that I've said a million times before, but I can't, I think there's a great recommendation.
Ms. Abbott, can you speak up? None of us can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now? No.
Barely. Something.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes. Yes.
I'll do that. So I'll just reiterate something that I've said a million times before, and I think everybody's probably sick of hearing. There's great recommendations in that report. I can't really disagree with any of it. A lot of it feels like band-aiding. You know, none of them really address the primary issue, is that we have 32 feet of road and we've shoved 4 lanes into it and people are driving 55 miles an hour. So until we can do a corridor wide improvement for East Main Road, I don't think we'll really be fixing our problem. You know, you just can't build a 32-foot wide road with 4 lanes and no sidewalks and no shoulders and expect it to be safe and user friendly. So I know there's a lot of projects, you know, in the long-term planning for RIDOT, but I really think Portsmouth needs to make it a priority to address the long-term design flaws of East Main Road and how we can improve it to keep our residents and our pedestrians and our RIPTA riders and our cyclists all safe when traveling through Portsmouth. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
President,
Yes, Mr. Jukusa?
could I just build on that by asking Mr. Crosby, is there a possibility that you could reach out to folks in Newport and Middletown? Because, you know, what's happening in Portsmouth certainly affects them, and we do need a regional effort.
Yes, there certainly is. We are currently working with Middletown on the alternatives for the bike path on East Main Road. Us and Middletown and DOT are collaborating on that, but there certainly is an opportunity to regionalize the effort, I guess. Yes, absolutely.
Right, especially if there's some sort of amounts that municipalities have to kick in, it would certainly make sense that Newport and Middletown kick into efforts to improve East and West Main Road.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. I don't see any more questions. There are none. All right. Now we will move on to our next item, which is new business. The Senior Center update and a memorandum of understanding between the town of Portsmouth and Church Community Housing Corporation regarding the development and use of the former Coxshell School and Ann Hutchinson School for housing. Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Rayner.
I'll start. Honorable Council, the proposed MOU with Church Community Housing is up for your discussion and approval tonight. There's been an incredible amount of interest and social media discussion regarding this, and I hope you will indulge me for a moment. First and foremost, the memorandum of understanding proposed to you tonight does not obligate the town to any long-term agreement. It makes Church Community Housing eligible for funding to contract with engineering and architectural firms to develop a master plan for town land at the Ann Hutchinson and Coggeshall School sites. It is an understanding between the town and Church Community Housing where the town agrees not to shop the property, i.e. sell it, during the period in which Church Community Housing works with those firms to prepare a proposal to be presented later to the council for your consideration and approval. The end result would be a long-term lease to Church Community Housing, much like the Senior Center has now, in exchange for a mixture of housing, which will be put on the tax roll, and a new senior center. The senior center is being discussed as a condition of this potential partnership because the current building has reached a point where the cost to refurbish, maintain, and repair it exceeds its value. There are some important points regarding how we got here that I'd like you to hear and consider. In 2018, the council authorized funding for a facility condition assessment report. In January of 2019, that condition assessment report was delivered to the council. In May of 2019, I met, through the invitation of councilors and state legislators with Church Community Housing for the purpose of discussing how they develop housing and discuss our issues in Portsmouth and how we were going to address them in our comprehensive community plan, and how an organization like theirs could help us address housing needs in Portsmouth. In December of 2019, at the request of the Senior Center Director, the Fire Marshal inspected the Senior Center. In January of 2020, I reported the results of that inspection, and I addressed an action plan to address the issues identified in that report. Our action plan, if you remember, divided the issues into 3 categories. Violations to be corrected by DPW, those to be corrected by on-call contractors, and violations that would need a variance from the State Fire Board. On the 10th of February, I reported to the council that a re-inspection of the building was going to be scheduled for 11th February after we had done some work to correct some of the discrepancies that were identified in the original report. On the 18th of February, the fire marshal, the state fire marshal, the fire chief, and myself sat before the Board of Appeal. I reported that the outcome of that board on the 24th of February. And there I reported that the board granted the variances for 3 of the outstanding violations: building sprinklers, headroom clearance at the front door, and the kitchen plenum and ductwork system. I also reported that those variances would expire on June 30th of 2012 or 2022. I also stated that over the next year, I would be attempting to develop alternative courses of action for your consideration with respect to the future of the senior center. In August of 2020, in email correspondence between me and the senior center director, the senior center director acknowledged the state of affairs with respect to the building and the need to think strategically about the future of the senior center. Also in August of 2020, I met again with Church Community Housing. I met the Church Community Housing Director, his deputy, and with seniors, with our state legislators, Senator Seveny and Representative Corcoran. At that meeting, it was very clear, obviously, that the principal purpose and mission of Church Community Housing is to work housing issues in communities. We explained to them that although we're painfully aware of the compelling need for more affordable housing solutions in Portsmouth, our focus has shifted to a solution to the senior center problem. And it was at that meeting that we discussed a proposal for them to consider, whereas they could help us address housing needs in Portsmouth on property that wasn't being used in Portsmouth. And could they also include in that proposal the design and development and building of a new senior center? We were told yes, that Church Community Housing could include a senior center as part of any housing development that they build. Obviously, that would be subject to the outcome of appropriate review, study, and research internal to Church Community Housing, which they did, and it took them the better part of 5 months to do that. They also stated that for this to work, they would cooperate closely with the town so that we could specify what the needs were and what would need to be addressed in a new community center as a part of any development. So it was written by Senator Seveny and Terry and Representative Corcoran that same month. The pros were that the town would avoid the need for any borrowing. We would repurpose unused land, that this new development goes onto the property tax rolls, and we would have a long-term fix to our senior citizens, for our senior citizens, which would be a new facility for their use. In October of 2020, I wrote a letter to the senior center, the chair of the senior center board, I discussed a number of issues that I had, but I outlined that I reiterated the amount of money it would take to address all the issues that were identified with the senior center that came from the facility condition assessment report. I also stated and wrote to her that I think it would be irresponsible for the town council to consider spending all that money on to address the building's deficiencies relative to the value of the building without considering other proposals. I also relayed to her that I had been working to develop a solution to address her agency's issue in the near and long term. I saw, and I wrote to her, that I believe that there were two issues that needed to be addressed. How and where can membership needs be met after the building can no longer be used for the purpose of a senior center? And two, what would and could be an appropriate long-term replacement for that building? On the 13th of October in 2020, I reported to the council that the same thing that I had already written to the chair of the senior center board. And I relayed to you that although the senior center is an independent, nonprofit, non-town department, which draws significant financial support from the town, that I expected that our support for that senior center would continue, and that we had an obligation to work with them to address their agency's issues in the short and long term. I also reiterated to you that the two problems that the senior center faced were an interim solution, a development of an interim solution, and the development of a long-term solution. On the 11th of January this year, I again reported to you that for the short and intermediate term, that I was working with the town of Middletown and the town of Middletown's town administrator to develop a proposed temporary home for the Portsmouth Senior Center starting this summer, and that he would discuss that with his council that following week. I also reported that for the long term, I have been working with Church Community Housing to develop a plan that would include the development of a new facility for the Portsmouth Senior Center. I stated that I would be reaching out to various stakeholders in the near future to further refine this concept and prepare in the preparation of a proposal for consideration by the council. On the 25th of last month, I reported to you that I had been very careful to keep the council fully aware of what I was doing to ensure that the center as an organization remains viable after the building they are currently housed in is no longer authorized for that use. I stated that the simple fact of the matter is that the Portsmouth Senior Center is a private nonprofit organization housed in a town-provided building, which is subsidized through annual civic support payments authorized by you, the town council. And that regardless, I believe that as a town, we should do what needs to be done to support the Portsmouth Senior Center and endeavor to take steps necessary to ensure the members of the organization have a safe and adequate center to congregate in. I again reiterated that it was important that we secure a permanent replacement for the Ann Hutchinson building and that we secure an intermediate home while plans are made and executed to secure a permanent home. And that with regard to securing a permanent home, that I have been discussing a partnership with Church Community Housing, and that in principle, Church Community Housing would build a new center for the town in exchange for a long-term lease of the property. And that the plan as envisioned would be no cost to the town. And that I would keep the council informed as the plan progressed. I also stated that in the interim, that I was discussing a proposed agreement with Middletown, and that the Middletown Town Administrator had received approval to work with me to develop a plan to incorporate our seniors, if they wish, into the Middletown Senior Center until we can build a new center in Portsmouth. On the 26th of January, the proposed MOU that you will consider tonight was finalized between myself, Church Community Housing, and the town solicitor. I could not get it on the 28th agenda because the agenda had already been published and we had already exceeded the OMA rules. on the 29th of January, an email correspondence between me and the senior center chair. I let her know that I was finally in a position to ask the council for permission to move forward with an MOU that would allow Church Community Housing to pursue funding to initiate engineering and planning, which will address her concerns. I also suggested that as a working group, we could work together with Church Community Housing in a partnership for the purpose of helping Church Community Housing in their planning process and ensure that the Senior Center Board's questions, concerns, desires, and needs were addressed. I also stated that once and if the council approves an MOU, that I could put that group together and that I was hopeful that she would consider being part of this working group. I also let her know that we have since secured an agreement in principle with Middletown, and that the town administrator in Middletown was offering to host our seniors at the Middletown Senior Center in the interim period and was now working on details of an agreement, which I hope to bring to you soon. Mr. President, that brings us up to tonight. I apologize for all the misinformation and any misunderstanding that the actions that I have taken over the last 18 months may have caused. But the reality is I'm working on a solution to a problem that needs to be addressed. The town provided building will no longer be authorized for use by the senior center without significant investment by June 30th. I hope you'll consider this as you deliberate this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Rayner. And that there is a lot of background there. A lot, as counselors, many of us are aware of what's occurred over the last 18 months regarding the senior center. Tonight, and there was a lot of information, but tonight, I'd like to just keep our focus on the MOU. We know that the senior center is scheduled to close June 30th, and that after June 30th, another task is going to be, temporary accommodations for seniors if we're not able to do something with the senior center before June 30th. So tonight I'd really like to just focus on the MOU portion of the issue. The other half of how we handle temporary accommodations would be at a future meeting, and we really should just focus to the MOU. I have some thoughts, but I know there's been a lot of questions. Do counselors have any questions at the moment?
I do.
Ms. Abbott?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm going to speak to this. Sorry, Ken, I'm going to go a little bit off the MOU topic because of all the correspondence I've been getting from constituents in the last couple of weeks. The memorandum of understanding is to address, to allow Church Community Housing to look into options for how to address our low-income housing issue in Portsmouth, which is an issue, and I agree it should be addressed. It does not address anything related to the senior center. On the same note, I don't see any scenario where included in a low-income housing element is a replacement for a senior center. I think I've said it here, and I've shown by my actions and my priorities that I believe we need a multi-purpose, multi-function community center that can address the needs of all our seniors appropriately and can address the needs of some of our other community groups like Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, theater groups. We have a huge need for a community center. There is a desire for it in the community. There's a need for it in the community. We don't have any facilities that meet those needs. We don't even have a YMCA in town. So we have a bigger issue here to deal with in finding a suitable long-term replacement for the senior center. I think we need a short-term solution because the building is closing on June 30th. But I just want to say, for the record, I do not believe that any project that we participate in with Church Community Housing is a suitable replacement for senior center. And we need to be looking at a suitable long-term solution. So I support the memorandum of understanding says for verbatim what's in there. I support the idea of replacing our unusable buildings, but I do not believe that is a replacement for a senior center.
They said there's an echo, so can you mute the mics here? Is that possible?
Well, I muted this one, supposedly that worked last time, but I think that mutes, that's the microphones.
Hey, are you folks getting an echo
Right,
from the
that's
council?
what I did.
There is.
I was getting a little bit of echo, yes.
It happens when somebody's speaking from the outside and it goes into the chamber, it kind of echoes back and forth.
And I did mute this one for a while and it did make a difference.
It was better towards the end of Daniela than it was in the beginning.
I'm hearing you loud and clear right now.
It was only Jared and Al.
Okay. All right.
Because she was going through.
Okay.
Wondering how to fix
Ms. Abbott, are you all set? I know your comments came across loud and clear. Is there any other counselors who'd like to speak at this time?
I would, Mr. President.
I'll go after Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. I met with the senior center executive director and chairperson of the board, excuse me, on Friday to review some of these issues, and also reached out to Executive Director Burlingame, who is the head of the State Fire Marshal's office and leads the board that made the decision to close the senior center down as of 6/30/2021. It has been reported that there was a belief that if we went and appealed the decision that we might get relief and be able to leave it open. The executive director assured me that would not be the case. The board's decision is final. He did not see an avenue for us to be able to get further relief to keep the center open for a longer period of time than 6/30/2021. Specifically, a couple of things on the MOU that are missing in my view here. There's no length of how long this MOU lasts. There's no end date. I think Christian is on board here someplace. If we could discuss that a little bit as to how long this process is going to take so that we know where we need to go to get a temporary home for the senior center, how long that's going to last so we can potentially put together funding to make sure that those facilities are available. And
I am here.
also, oh, there you are, Christian. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Go ahead. I just, there's no date time frame on here. So if you could let me know what your thought process is and how long the engineering design process looking for funding might take.
Sure. And I could give you a more concrete answer if this was only a housing development. Those, we have a long history of doing housing developments, and I would say it's anywhere between a single family home takes a year probably, but a large multifamily development is 3 to 5 years depending upon complexity from this point to full occupancy. I think the open-endedness of the MOU reflects the fact that there is a senior center component to this, which is in fact the first and foremost priority. That the addition of housing to a senior center development is one of the goal of addressing multiple needs of the town in one effort, and also because the housing funding that may be brought to bear may actually go to support the costs of the development of the senior center. So I think the 3 to 5 year range is still probably pretty good, but to some extent, it depends on what we learn from the town in terms of its needs. It depends on whether or not it's just a senior center or if it turns into something more of a multi-purpose facility. It depends on what the funding environment looks like after we complete the master plan, and how long it takes to get the development fully funded. And I just want to point out that we are absolutely looking at this as a partnership with the town. As Mr. Rayner stated, the town began talking to us and asked us if this was something that we'd be interested in doing. And we are. And right away, I said, we need to set up a committee, an advisory committee of stakeholders, so that we can work in partnership with the town to make sure that the town's needs are being met through this initiative, that the needs of the seniors for a senior center are being met through this initiative, that the town's needs in terms of housing are being met through this initiative. Some possibilities of what could come out of this master planning process is that we could add some housing for seniors on the same site the senior center would exist. But we aren't defining what we're trying to do to that level of specificity yet, because senior housing is the most difficult type of housing to get funding for through the funding agencies. And so, one of the things that we've been looking at is how do we incorporate market rate housing? Perhaps we do some single family market rate unsubsidized housing to take advantage of Portsmouth's really strong residential real estate market, and do some market rate sales so that we can generate some sales proceeds to reinvest into the development to cover some of the costs of the elderly affordable housing units or the costs of the senior center. So I hope everyone that's listening hears that our intention here is to work in partnership with the town, to work with stakeholders in the town to develop something through a master planning process that would achieve the goals of the town. Because I have heard a fair amount of, I think, misinformation. And it's just, I think, because, we're at such an early stage that people just have started talking, and we haven't had the opportunity yet to start working with the town and an advisory committee. So, thank you for the opportunity to talk about where we're at.
I'm going to have a few more questions for you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Based on your comments there, you're not necessarily averse to having the site that the senior center would go on as to be surrounded by senior housing rather than just total LMI housing. But
No,
that
that's
might take longer.
So senior housing and LMI housing are not exclusive. In fact, we have a couple hundred units of elderly affordable housing. It qualifies, many seniors are on fixed incomes, and while they may have strong assets, they meet the income criteria that qualifies them for subsidized elderly housing. And when people hear that, they get nervous about what that means. But I gave a tour to Mr. Rayner and Senator Sevigny and Representative Cartravin, and I would be happy to give anyone a tour of our elderly housing developments, because I think most of them would be described as prime real estate. We have former mansions that have been converted into affordable elderly housing. We have Jamestown elderly housing that has water views. We have converted churches that are elderly housing developments. But the challenge is that the funders don't see elderly affordable housing as high of a priority as family housing or housing for the disabled, because, as I stated before, an elderly person on a fixed income who has a lot of assets can still qualify for subsidized elderly housing. So part of the reason that we're interested in this development is because when a municipality, when a town makes a commitment to try to do elderly affordable housing, it incentivizes the funding agencies into considering it more than they would otherwise. And so the fact that the town may be willing to enter into a long-term lease of these properties, it signals to the funders, oh, the town is willing to put some real skin in the game here. And so then maybe they are more likely to provide funding to actually create that elderly housing.
Thank you for that explanation, but I think my question was a little bit lost. Can you, I don't want to say commit, but I think one of the concerns is mixed income or mixed aged housing at the senior center site, where the seniors right now would prefer to have it just 65 plus, or pick a number, and not mixed in with 25 and 30-year-olds at the senior center site.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should go through a master planning process. I just don't know what the right mix is there, and we're at such an early stage in a potential process that I would hate to lock us into anything. I will say this, that if we are considering family housing, the model for that has changed significantly over the past few years. It's now recognized that if you're going to do subsidized family housing, you want to do it in a small percentage of the overall number of units developed in a particular development. So it used to be that in an effort to try to develop as many units of affordable housing as possible, you would do one development that was 100% subsidized. And what the research is now showing is that for family housing, you really want to do 20 or 30% as subsidized and have 70 or 80 the family housing be unsubsidized, be market rate housing. And so that's what we would be proposing if it makes sense to have family housing on this site. The vast majority of it would be unsubsidized, would be market rate housing, and then interspersed throughout, there would be 20 to 30% that would be affordable units.
I know you haven't really got into the nuts and bolts of the engineering and the design of it yet, but what is your thought process on the number of total units, just a ballpark?
I mean, that's what we have to bring the engineers in for. There's no public sewer in Portsmouth, so it's really the carrying capacity of the land to support septic systems, I think, is what's going to be the limiting factor there. But that's that's absolutely okay, because you don't get to be a 52-year-old organization by building things that a community doesn't want. Church community housing has had this staying power because we have a focus on being a good neighbor, because we have a focus on being a partner. And I don't want to have us develop anything in a neighborhood that isn't going to be welcomed by the neighborhood. And so we're not going to be proposing any high rises or anything else that's out of keeping for Portsmouth as a community. Although I guess you technically do have kind of one high rise.
We do have one high rise, yes. Have you toured the current building yet? And
I have.
And any thoughts of being able to possibly rehab that? I mean, it's a lot of money to rehab it. I know there's money, there's numbers been thrown around, but you're looking roughly $500,000 for a sprinkler system. A roof needs to be replaced. There's doorways that need to be replaced. If you put apartments or housing upstairs, you'd have to put in elevators. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not,
Yeah,
a simple,
this is-
hey, let's get the family together with a bunch of hammers and nails and fix the place up and it'll be ready on Monday morning.
Yeah, this is what we need the MOU for. There's funding that's available to us for pre-development that allows us to hire engineers and architects to do exactly these kinds of assessments. And I really like the school building. I think so. If we have an MOU that at least says the town is on board in terms of allowing us to develop this master plan and won't be shopping the properties around while we're spending money on architects and engineers, then that allows us to bring in the engineers, a structural engineer, for example, to look at the property and to see, what the real limitations are there in terms of, a renovation, redevelopment, with possible addition of elderly housing units. But that all is work that has to be done by the engineers and architects to be able to make those determinations. I would just like to add one more thing to the other point about mixing families in with the elderly here. I do think that they would probably be in separate buildings. I think we would not be looking to develop both senior housing and family housing in the same building. I would envision that those being separate buildings, sort of a campus style development where you've got the senior center and senior housing in one building, and maybe, at the other end of the lot, you have another building that has family housing, and maybe there's, a courtyard or something in between. I'm not, who knows what the master planning process will produce, but I do want to say that I think it makes sense to keep what could be, families with kids who are running around, not living above senior families.
I'd still like to have some sort of a time frame stuck in here, so that it's not open-ended. You've stated 3 to 5 years, there a possibility. We could always extend it after a couple of years, but I'd like to see some sort of an end date, because otherwise, without us tearing this up, we're stuck in this theoretically for lifetime. So I think it needs some sort of an end date.
Sure. I guess I'd ask it to be on the longer side of that then, because I'm going to be going to a funder and asking them for at least $100,000 to spend on architectural and engineering work. And they're going to, want to see that if they spend that money on that work, that, in 2 years from now, you're not back out trying to find another buyer, another party to work with for that. I think it could take a while to develop, this in partnership with the town. It's easier and faster if you just do things by yourself, but the outcome isn't as good as if you work in a partnership, but it's often a little bit slower that way.
Certainly not going to allow you to work by yourself. There's going to be certainly a lot of interest, as you've already seen.
Mhm.
So today's February 8th, 2021. December 31st, 2025. That gives you almost 4 years. I mean, I would be hoping that in 2 years, less than 2 years, you're putting, or somebody's putting a shovel in the ground. We can't have our seniors commuting all the way to Middletown for 5 years.
Yeah, it doesn't do me any good for it to take any longer than necessary.
Agreed. So we have an understanding there. So I think, Mr. President, I'll make some motions once, in terms of timeframes, once we get through the further discussion. And Dr. Ryan, I think you're up next. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
All right.
I just had a question and a comment. My question is, looking at the Jacobs report, it is going to cost better than $10 million if we were to rehab both Agashol and Hutchinson schools. Obviously, we're not going to do that. To actually carry out a project such as you're envisioning, typically, where does the funding come from?
Well, it's not uncommon that we have 9 to 12 different funding sources in a large development. So it comes from a host of different funders. There's generally conventional financing, debt on the property that's based on the rental income. There's a host of soft grant funding sources. Those generally originate with Rhode Island Housing or the Office of Housing and Community Development or the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. We generally try to tap all of those. In this instance, I think there's a strong possibility that we'll be selling some market rate housing to try to self-subsidize the development with the proceeds from those market rate sales. The town's contribution here in terms of, there not being an acquisition cost is a big source to the development. And so that's the short list. It's always development specific. I mean, there have been land trusts involved in other developments. When we partnered with Lucy's Hearth and acted as their development consultant, we brought in a private fundraiser who worked with us. We sought and were awarded all of the housing related funding, and the fundraiser worked to solicit the private donations and funding from foundations to support Lucy's Hearth's programming and office space, the expenses related to that. So it really just has to do with what that particular development needs and what funding sources are out there. And I think we have a really strong track record of figuring out where those funds are and working to get the funding that's needed to make a development work.
Thank you. I just want to thank Mr. Rayner and the town staff for developing this plan. Looking at the costs enumerated in the Jacobs report is quite intimidating. And the idea that the town would be having to undertake either rehabbing or replacing two once 100-year-old school buildings for some of the purpose on its own was something I just did not know we as a town were going to do. This actually helps us solve this problem, and it also helps us to solve the chronic problem that we have consistently failed to provide the percentage of affordable housing in our community that's mandated by the state. So I think this is a very positive plan. I'm very much in favor of this. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. I'd like to just ask a couple of questions here. And these are going to go to you, Christian, just as a follow-up to Mr. Hamilton's earlier question. How long would it take to complete the master plan programming for the sites? Is that a 6-month, 9-month type of duration or less?
Again, because it's a partnership and we intend to be working with an advisory committee of stakeholders, it's not really within our control to be able to say how long that process is going to take to get everybody on board with the ultimate plan. I think 6 to 9 months is probably optimistic. I think a year is probably more likely in terms of, from now until we have a schematic plan that's gone through the master planning process and everybody's on board, I'd say a year.
I just, I mean, from my perspective of just hearing some of the discussions tonight, and yeah, I think it is important for us to kind of, it is a partnership, but try to have a schedule with some expectations and kind of an end game for even the seniors, so that there's there's something to have a focus on. I think there's different components here. We talk about the housing component, but we're also talking about the senior center, and I think there might be some apprehension that the senior center might lag behind because maybe the housing has to take place first in order to get some funding for the senior center. So, I just think it's important that we have that we can get to a plan somehow in the MOU that maybe within that first year, we try to make sure we have a firm deadline for a plan, a master plan, for the development. And I think with the MOU, there's been some questions about really just focuses on the housing. If maybe within the MOU, we could expand the scope of duties to just explain that, in addition to the housing component, we are looking for the development of a senior center, whether it's independent or part of a facility, part of one of the buildings like you were describing, that there's at least some type of definition or tying in the senior center to the MOU, so that we know that it's a two-part process. There's a housing component, but there's also the senior component, the senior center component. Because I think you mentioned the work group. I think it's important that we have a working group that helps define that the parameters for the senior center, so that we all know, that there's buy-in every step of the way. Those were my comments, and a little bit online with Mr. Hamilton said with trying to nail down a schedule. I think it's important that everybody understands what our goals are through the process.
Yeah, I'm fine with identifying dates and specifically referring to the senior center. It's always been understood that the senior center was the driving factor behind this for the town. So to the extent that that isn't reflected adequately, it didn't even occur to me, because that was just always how I understood this project to what it involved. So absolutely. And in terms of, setting a timeline for having the master plan completed, if you want to set that at a year, I mean, I feel like we're at the early stages of this. And once we get started and once we are having meetings and have the engineers and architects engaged, and the town, residents and staff and whoever else ends up being on the working group with us, I have faith that everyone will understand, or most everyone will understand that, we're working in good faith. They'll see progress happening. Hopefully they'll see progress happening in a direction that they're satisfied with. And so I'm not super concerned with, deadlines and timeframes, because once you get into a project, if it's a good project, then people will want to see it succeed. And if we aren't, able to produce a product that is satisfactory to the town, then the sooner that's realized, the better for everybody, quite frankly, because we're an earned income organization. We survive through developers' fees. And if it isn't going to work out, then it doesn't do us any good to be spinning our wheels for years on end.
Thank you, Christian. I do see that are there any other questions, comments from councilors? I know there's a hand up and there's several questions. Let's go to Mr. Martin. Hello?
Which Ms. Martin?
I had to unmute.
Mary Martin?
Thank you, Council and Executive Director Belvin. Many of my questions were answered throughout the discussion. One question remaining is, after the MOU is signed, and as stated throughout the various discussions tonight, it is very broad and it needs to be tailored and a little tightened to address the senior center and date specifics. However, after the MOU is signed, it's my understanding that will give permission to Church Community Housing to come up with various different proposals that can be submitted to the council. And the concern is with these town properties, it will be leased to Church Community Housing. And within that, it gives the power to the council to vote on these proposals themselves and not open it to a public vote, because it will be leased land and not a sale of the land. Is that correct?
I think what she's referring to the concept that, you know, if it's over a certain size, it has to go to public referendum. We're not selling the property, we're leasing the property. Same thing
Correct.
we do with other properties in town, the or concessionaire agreements that we have, the stables, the campground, quite frankly, the senior center right now, they pay $1 a year. It would be the same kind of arrangement. So it wouldn't need to go to a vote because we would always retain ownership of the land.
It would be a council decision, but as designs are prepared, I'm anticipating that there would be workshops or public hearings regarding, you know, whatever the potential developments are, so that there are, you know, that there's input.
Yeah, correct. I think that's what Christian just spent a lot of time trying to explain.
Right. So I get Mary, to your, I'm not sure if we answered your question, but it would be a council decision, but there would be there would be an open process, working towards the proposals.
Okay, maybe some language could be included in the memorandum to alleviate some of those concerns as well. I mean, because there's a lot of public perception out there that the public's not going to have a say in this because of the broadness of this memorandum and giving so much decision making to the council and not opening up to a public discussion.
All right. I mean, those are good comments. I believe that we have I mean, it's been stated tonight, working group would be part of the process. And then the rest is really design process. I mean, I don't know how much we can put into the MOU at this point. We might be able to craft it a little bit, tweak it a little bit. And
That would have to be submitted as part of the proposal. This MOU is just.
this is just to get the process rolling.
We're not going to sell the land.
Right.
But the concern is, once that MOU is signed, it is open up to many, many possibilities and proposals.
Proposal would have to come back to the council. Nothing can happen in that property unless you.
Right, but I mean, you are correct that there could be many proposals, but nothing could happen without a vote from the town council. The town council has, you know, the say in what gets accepted or approved. I mean, at this point, we're only, trying to come up with Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, trying to find out what's feasible for these locations. Right?
Correct.
I mean, at this point, we don't even know what the potential is for developments at either location. So this early, and I think this is where I was thinking about this first phase of the master plan, and trying to get a master plan done with some potential options and the costs associated with those options, so that we could then make decisions to continue to move forward That's how I was seeing this process play out. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but that was my understanding, is that this first year we'd be looking at coming up with some type of option or two options for each location through the planning process, through the working groups, and whatnot.
And that raises my next question. Who will be on these working groups? And why weren't the working groups formed prior to the MOU?
Well, the purpose of the working group is to work with church community housing. Without an MOU, there's no sense for the working group. So this is just one more step. If the council approves the MOU, then we'll start forming working groups.
And who's being considered for these working groups?
I mean, at this point, we haven't made those decisions yet, but it would probably be a mix of some council members, some members of the senior center, obviously, folks from church community, the design team, citizens, and there'd be at least.
Yeah, this will be a focus group.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be 40, 50 people. This
Right.
is going to be a focus group of stakeholders.
Probably 8 to 10.
Who have
8 to 10 people.
this is a group that's going to work with church community housing with regard to the senior center and talk about that site. So it's going to be a group of people that are willing to work in partnership with church community housing to develop a proposal for your consideration. This is not a group that is going to be formed to save the Ann Hutchinson building per se. That's not what the purpose of this group is for. And that's why we have to wait and see if the MOU gets signed. If the MOU doesn't get signed, then we got to go to another plan.
Okay, thank you for your clarification.
Thank you. I'm just going to go in order. I'm assuming Mr. Fitzgerald next. Is that a fair statement? I just saw there was 3 hands up. Mr. Fitzmaurice?
Yes, Mr. Aguirre, thank you very much. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I've taken a look at the charter in reference to this business of a public vote for Cogshell. I don't think it's required for Ann Hutchinson School, but I think it is for the Cogshell property. The property is listed in the plat map as 7 acres. So it's a good deal part of land. My reading is that any property right that is transferred requires on property in excess of 2 acres requires a public vote. So if that's, and obviously we're in disagreement here. And but I would like everybody to read paragraph 912 on page 31. I think it's fairly straightforward. But if we can't reach an agreement on this, I think we need a written opinion by the town solicitor that this is okay. At the time this thing was adopted in the charter in 2010, there was an extensive discussion about the powers of the council to transfer or otherwise dispose of property without a public vote. And I believe at the time, the solicitor interpreted this to mean that these things would go for public. And there may have been an opinion written and inserted in the record. So I think it's appropriate for the council to research this and come back with a solid answer. Also, I think it's more than appropriate. I think it's required. We should have an opinion from our solicitor current. So that's one thing I'd like to request. I'd also like to request an independent and professional assessor do evaluation of the properties before we get too far down the road here. I think we need to know what they are, what the assessment is, because I think that we're dealing with things that are fairly expensive. They represent a lot of property and value owned by the town. Also, a question, please. What is the annual payment for the lease expected to be? There's been no identification as far as I know.
Hasn't been decided, but I imagine it would be modeled after what we do with the senior center currently. Currently, the senior center pays $1 a year for a long-term lease. However, the advantage with the proposal that we hope the council would consider is that this property would go on the tax roll.
Well, if the town retained ownership, how would it go on the tax?
The town would own the land, the housing structure would be taxed.
All right. I would also note that Mr. Aguirre's comment about citizens being involved in this focus group or working group or whatever it is it's going to be called. But again, I'd like to repeat that we're dealing with a good deal of the property of the town of Portsmouth, and the general citizenship should have a role in this group. That doesn't mean me, by the way, but I think it's appropriate to have a number of general citizens on this, and I think it's appropriate to have the people from the senior center represented as well. So I think that's about all I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. We don't know any details about these durations. I mean, at this point, we're just trying to get to step one, which is,
Going outside.
yeah, I mean, step one is really to, are we gonna approve an MOU that would allow the process to begin? I mean, there's a lot of questions. We don't have any answers unless we embark down the road. So, is it, Shields? Is that how it's pronounced? Kathleen?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering if it's valid to think, it's a little bit of the MOU, but also I'm a little concerned about the 5-year period for our seniors and the option of going to Middletown. I mean, we're going to lose all momentum with our senior population. I mean, you're looking at vaccinations at Raytheon at this point in time. If we had a vital senior center in town, like our neighboring towns do with the town commitment, town investment, we wouldn't be in this situation, first of all. And now we're looking to ask our seniors to possibly go to Middletown. I'm not sure if they can absorb our seniors. If we're talking about East Main Road and West Main Road being unsafe, and then we're going to send our senior population out on those roads, whereas Bristol Ferry is a safe location for them. And so I'm just wondering if there can be some short-term solutions or short-term discussions on possible temporary locations in town, in safe locations for our senior center while the proposals are being developed. I think our seniors deserve this. I think in some large way, the town has responsibility for the situation that we're in. It's being passed along to the seniors to raise money for sprinkler systems and that sort of thing. Neighboring towns do not request that. There's been capital improvements. There's been investment in the senior center. There's, and then they get grants on top of their public funding. So I'm just wondering what can be done to address the 1 to 5 years. And I also am not convinced that the church community group is the most viable solution for a senior center or a multi-purpose center, a recreation center. Why do we have to attach that project onto affordable housing? I feel like it's some ways passing the buck to another organization, and the town town leadership seems to be thinking that that's the only solution. And I'm not sure that it's the best solution. It's certainly one that can be reviewed and looked at, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be the sole solution. And I would like to see the town council maybe readdress options for a viable center in the short term and the long term, attached or unattached to church community group.
I don't have an answer for the short term at this point. I know that there has been a lot of effort has gone into coordinating and trying to find suitable locations. Unfortunately, the town does not have excess property that we could relocate the senior center to. I think we've evaluated properties and looked around what could be available, and I don't believe any of that met some of the criteria that the senior center administration was looking for. There were certain requirements for size, office space, parking accommodations. There's certain criteria that is suitable for the Hutchinson School that really isn't available at most other locations within the town. So we have exhausted the town inventory of properties, and there just is no place for us to temporarily relocate the senior center. As far as other options, I don't know. At the moment, the proposal for this MOU with Church Community does have a lot of benefits. It addresses a couple of locations within the town that we as a town currently do not have the resources or a plan to address either location. So, I think we're exploring our options, and right now this is a viable proposal that we're considering with this MOU. I don't know if anybody else would like to weigh in on that.
I would-
Your hand going.
If I may, Mr. President.
Yep.
Ms. Shields, Ms. Shield, I agree with a lot of what you said. Unfortunately, I think this problem is something that has been decades in the making. It's been decades of neglect to the senior center that we did have. We didn't take care of what we had. We didn't take care of what our seniors deserve. The senior center is not currently a part of the town government. It is not a town department. Maybe it should be. That's a different conversation, I think. We are taking steps to try to resolve this issue and create a modern, functional, multi-purpose community center that will meet the needs of our seniors in the way that they deserve and that our town needs. I get a little frustrated by this whole process because I think it reflects a lot of the issues that we've had in the decades past, in that we're trying to solve this problem for free, or to find someone who will take this off our list of problems to pay for and to take care of. And at the end of the day, we need to, as a town, recognize our priorities, recognize our needs, and be prepared to address them. And you know what? None of that happens for free. It takes money to maintain a senior center. It takes money to build a new senior center if that's what we need. But that's why we have a town government, to provide the services that our residents need and the things that you expect from a town. So I am hesitant, but I support the memorandum of understanding because I think there are good things that can come of it. And we can find good solutions for two buildings that have been neglected and underutilized for decades. That does not in any way, shape, or form meet the requirements of what we need for a senior center or a multi-purpose community center. And I think that is something that we are addressing separately. I wrote, and our town was awarded a grant to fund a Parks and Recreation Master Plan to address the needs of exactly what a community center could be, and addressing the needs of our senior center is one of the top priorities for that process. So I would urge us to detach this affordable housing conversation from our senior center conversation and try to take the right steps towards solving the problems that our community faces and meeting the needs of our community. So they are separate conversations. Turning our abandoned schools into affordable housing and attaching some kind of room in it and then calling it a day just because we had got it done for free is not an adequate solution as far as I'm concerned. And I think my constituents would agree with that. So thank you for your comments. And I look forward to what comes next.
Thank you. I'm
Back to Mrs. Shields, sorry about that.
I'm okay. I appreciate those comments, Danielle, very much. They're very much in line with what I'm thinking. I think this MOU is a cover to kick the can down the road. And I think it should be detached. All of the things you said and all the things I said, I'm completely in agreement with. I appreciate church communities stepping up and considering working with Portsmouth on this proposal. I appreciate that this option has been presented, but I also think other options need to be pursued as well. And I am concerned that there has been no short-term plan for the seniors for what could be up probably minimum 5 years, and that's problematic. But I appreciate you listening to what I said, and thank you.
Let's move on to Mrs. Davidson.
Hi, Rosemary, 75 Frank Drive. I've been listening, and first of all, I heard Mr. Fitzmaurice talking about the ordinance that we have if a certain amount of land was to be sold. That was done because of the Glen. At the time, people were interested in selling off parcels of the Glen. And the town in 1973 had voted for that land to become open space. So that's where that came from. Secondly, I agree with Daniela. The town has been very, very lax in maintaining these buildings. The senior center, for as long as I can remember, and I'm 77, has been a topic of discussion for renovation, for improvement, for maintenance every year, going back to when we were at those town meetings, standing up with a microphone, advocating for schools and every other thing that came across our agendas then. But I have a thing for preservation, and I don't favor the idea of tearing down Ann Hutchinson School. You saw Anthony School be renovated. That's housing. But I think that Ann Hutchinson School could be renovated. Maybe some apartments upstairs for seniors. I don't see a whole development of houses for families and everything on that property. The seniors are very happy there. You're going to put them out for 5 years. Unfortunately, many of them will be gone by then. You're going to send them to Middletown, and that senior center, where is it? It's in an old school that has been fixed and renovated and maintained. I worked in Middletown. I know how they maintain their buildings. So I don't advocate for preserving Cogshell School. That doesn't seem to me to be a historical structure the way Ann Hutchinson School is. I do advocate for keeping the Little League field, so. So before you, I know Mr. Rayner hasn't jumped into this. I know he's been doing a lot of work to try to solve this problem. But there is a certain feeling in this town that maybe some are not picking up on, that we respect our seniors, that we want to do things that are right for them, just as we want to do with the schools for our young people. But we haven't done that. Think long and hard before you give up this acreage. Do you know what an acre of land is costing now in Portsmouth? Come down to my neighborhood and see. HGTV knows how much the land costs right next door to me. So before you give this up, please, we will own the land, I believe, right? We will own the land. But I just think that if you renovated the senior center and made it livable and nice for them, that would be a good solution. Look around at all the old buildings that have been restored. Portsmouth just likes to tear down. And I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Someday you'll say, Grammy was right.
Thank you, Rosemary. Let's move on to Tom. Grebe?
Hi, Tom Grebe, 110 Sayre Drive. I heard Mr. Rayner tonight say that there's a lot of misinformation going around, and I absolutely agree. It's on both sides. Tonight I've heard a lot about getting a senior center without it costing the town any money. When ALT comes before the council, they always remind us of the high cost which developments bring to our town services. In this case, we could be looking up at maybe up to 70, maybe 100 units. Families do require town services. If those units have children, we could be looking at 50 to 100 additional students. Our average cost per student is over $16,000 a year. This could mean $1 million per year in additional education costs alone. Believe me, I am not against affordable housing in town, but we need, in coupling these, we've got to make sure we understand that it is not getting a senior center without costs to the town. Furthermore, if the development runs over in its cost, as happened in the police station, Church Community Housing might pony up the additional money needed. More likely, similar to the dog park, they will ask Portsmouth to share in the overrun. Or they could cut back like we did on the police station when we eliminated dormers. I would submit, because community housing's main objective is housing, any cutbacks would likely affect the senior or community center. However you look at this deal, this is not a no cost to the town of Portsmouth deal. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. I think, believe it or not, I think like Ms. Abbott, the two need to be decoupled. And I think everybody would be a lot happier making sure that each one of them was done properly instead of combining something or two things that will probably need compromises on both. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I'm going to go to Mrs. Green. Hello? Mrs. Green?
Hello?
Yes. How you doing, Mrs. Green?
Thank you. I had trouble unmuting. Nancy Grebe, 110 Thayer Drive. My husband and I are in completely different parts of the house. I had no idea we were together. But no one is more surprised than I, with the possible exception of Miss Abbott, that both Thomas and I agree on the principle that these should be two separate deals. We need to take the senior housing out of the MOU. A community center is a much needed in our town. And I honestly think they should be separated. Other than that, I can't say anything else. My husband, without our getting together, absolutely had almost the same things to say. Thank you.
Okay. A big house. Let's go to Mr. Vitt. Mr. Vitt? Hello, Mr. Vitt? Hello, John? All right, we lost him.
Mr. President, he typed in a question whether or not the MOU needs to be signed tonight. Can we get more answers first? What about renting the old something, but he stops typing. I don't know what the end of it is, but does the MOU need to be signed tonight, and can we get more answers first?
Okay, well.
Again, I don't know what the old something is.
Yeah. All right. Well, we may get back to Mr. Vitt. And then it's Jean? Jean? Hello? Oh, we got unmute.
All my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Oh. All right. Okay. So do we, I think we've covered all the comments from attendees and questions. I believe we've covered them. Counselors, does anybody, I don't know. Suji Puza. All right, I'm looking, I see the hand up.
Right, thank you. I just want to thank everyone who's reached out and spoken tonight, and all the people who have been working on this issue. We know that all of us care about the seniors and the quality of life in this town. And I want to just say that I believe that this is an opportunity for us to explore options that cannot, frankly, wait for separate discussions to happen. Like, life is not like that. Sometimes you have to multitask, and I do believe that this is a valuable opportunity. I've toured church community housing, not with the idea of senior center in mind. However, all their projects have been done very well, and they're a very reputable partner. And I just believe that this is an opportunity to explore that partnership. And I appreciate everyone's work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kapuza. Okay.
Mr. President.
Mr. Kelly.
So I was very gung ho about voting for this MOU. But I have a lot of concerns, namely the length of time. 3 years of our seniors going to Middletown, or 5 years of our seniors going to Middletown isn't acceptable. We got to do better than that. I know that that's a good short-term solution, but I was not thinking 3 years or 5 years. I was thinking 1 year. Maybe that was naive. I agree with Mrs. Davidson in a lot of what she said. I know the building needs a lot of work, and I know it's 97 years old, but it's got good bones, I think. It's, I guess it's going to be studied. But I like the way it looks, and I like the functionality that it's provided for our senior center. The senior center, is multifaceted. It needs space. It needs a kitchen and a cafeteria and a function room and offices and bathrooms and at least an additional conference room. And the thrift shop provides, endless opportunity for our seniors to socially interact with the community at large and each other while working, essentially. And that doesn't include the, pool room or exercise room or bridge room. Well, you don't need a bridge room. You can do that in a conference room. But, it also reminds me that when I first kind of was getting involved back in 2012, well, I ran in 2010, but also in 2012. And 2012, I was spearheading the effort to keep Elmhurst Chapel. And I didn't know then that now would probably be an opportune time to have an extra building that had some rooms attached to it. And it got torn down, and now we don't have that space to use. And it was a nice looking building from the inside, and it could have been nice on the outside. I'll also state that, we'll get a legal opinion from our town solicitor, but I think Mr. Fitzmaurice might be on the right track with section 912. So that does certainly need to be looked at and explored. I wonder if there is a way that while being engaged in this MOU, we may as a community renovate perhaps the current senior center. I'm not sure if that's allowable. I'd like to know. Maybe the town administrator or the director of Church Community Housing can give me an answer on that. Because 3 years is too long.
For Church Community Housing, if the town wanted to renovate the senior center so that the seniors could stay there while we worked on the master plan, we would have absolutely no opposition to that.
Thank you.
And can I just add too, that I just go back to what I said earlier about the time frame, which is that, we are asking for this MOU so that we can go and get pre-development funding to hire the engineers and architects to start working on this plan. If we can get it done faster, that absolutely is to our benefit. But when we're asking for this funding to hire the design team, that the funder needs to know that this isn't going to just be something that they spend their money on and then the town changes its mind in a year or two. And so while we absolutely intend to do the development as quickly as is possible while delivering the highest quality development, it's the MOU timeframe is driven by giving the funder the confidence they need more than it is reflective of the length of time that it could take to do the development.
I have a question. Mr. Belvin, is it possible that we go through this process and it's not feasible for the development to proceed?
Yes.
Based on some of the things that we talked about, and you mentioned it, it's really part of the development is going to be driven by site suitability, septic systems. You can only get so much development on the land. That might tell you right away, you can only get a few units out there. I know you don't have a number yet as to what the potential development could be, but if everything's based on, site suitability, that could be a limiting factor at both locations. So I think the potential here is there a scenario where the project would not move forward? Like, in your mind, is there a potential where a development and a senior center could not occur, say at the current Ann Hutchinson location?
I think there are probably numerous ways that the development could not go forward. I think it could be that there's such split opinion within the town on what should go there, that there's no one single proposal that would satisfy enough people to have consensus. I think that there's the possibility that if we go through the process and come up with a proposal that does have consensus, that it isn't something that is financially viable. I think there are so many ways that any potential development could not succeed. But I think, when you look at our history, that's what we do, is figure out how to make developments work. And so I certainly would not be here tonight if I didn't think that there was a way to develop a proposal that would earn the consensus of the town and meet the needs of the seniors through a senior center and provide much needed housing for the community. But I can't guarantee that. All of this, these are things that will be determined over time through the process.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any more questions? Further?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Buttermeyer.
sorry, my voice is a little hoarse, which is why I'm sitting in my basement now. There's a couple things. I just want to be clear, right? So I think we need to start somewhere. So this MOU is a starting point. I think we've all pointed out tonight that from all the comments that the language needs tightened up a bit. There's a couple pieces of unfinished business, some comments that I think we need to add to it. But basically, we need to start somewhere. And Mr. Rayner stated earlier, the MOU commits us to nothing, correct? So with it not committing us to anything directly, we need to start somewhere. We've talked about neglecting our buildings. We've talked about not doing anything. By not moving forward, we're not doing something. We're furthering the pattern of neglect by not doing something. So this MOU is something. It doesn't commit us to anything. We're beholden to it beyond this agreement for Mr. Belden to get to work and get us some pricing and get us a project of what we're going to do. So with that notion, I'm in support of it. I think the language needs tightened up. I think we've mentioned some things tonight from the comments of the community that needs to be added in, but basically stating the MOU is a jumping off point, and we need to get to that point. We're there now. We've neglected it long enough. We've got to do something.
Okay. So, what's the,
I think Keith had some amendments, maybe.
I was gonna circle back, Mr. Hamilton?
Well, I think the biggest First Amendment for me would be just putting a time frame on it. And I think the date of, I think a year is more than enough to develop some sort of a master plan and you know, for Christian to hopefully bring that back to us. And obviously working with the working group as well. And then I can't see, I mean, I would hope that we're seeing progress well before December 31st, 2020. What did I say earlier? 4 or 5? 5, right? So that gives you almost a solid 5 years. As far as the working group goes, it needs to be a functional group. I think, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 11 people is a good functioning group. Once you get into larger groups, it becomes, you know, tough to get everybody together, get consensus, to get the ball moving forward. So, working group, I guess, is separate, but I would like to see a date in here, date certain that this ends if we're not seeing any progress, and I think that would be December 31st, 2025. I would also like it pointed out, I would like it clarified more. I would like to see more senior housing towards the senior center area. It's not specifically written in here. It's written in here as just housing, not senior housing. I would like that a little bit more clarified. So whereas, I guess the second, whereas the town of Portsmouth and has approached church community housing to develop a plan for the use of said properties for housing with an emphasis on senior housing. I don't think, you know, that doesn't narrow down. I would like to see more senior housing here up the street from me at the Ann Henderson area, and potentially more of the family type housing at the Cogshell area. One question that was brought up earlier by Mrs. Davidson, the ball fields at Cogshell site stay. They don't go anywhere. They're being utilized. I can't say as much for the Jack Callahan field, which is at Ann Hutchinson. I am also old enough to remember the Anthony House, and there was a baseball field there too before it became a septic system. So those are my big concern is putting a time frame on this, so it's not an open-ended commitment for the town or church community housing. I know, Christian, you know, based on your feedback and discussion tonight, it does you no good to sit on your hands and not do anything. So you want to get the ball rolling, which is great. And I'd like to see us get the ball rolling. I would ask that we advertise for committee members and have those applications in. I guess they'd have to be in by next Friday, right? To get them on the next agenda, which is a little bit too tight. So we'd have to probably do the committee assignments the first meeting in March.
Yep.
You know, I would suggest a couple of counselors, obviously the town administrator, whoever Christian needs, whether it's just himself or maybe 1 or 2 other people on his design crew. Certainly the senior center executive board, a couple of members from that. So my motion would be to put in a date certain. I don't know where it would go in here, probably right at the end. After, I guess, 3.3, that this memorandum of understanding will end on December 31st, 2025, unless extended mutually by both parties. Did you get that, Madam Clerk?
Mhm.
Okay.
I second that motion. Oh, do you want to make it all one big motion? Sorry.
No, I think that's just one for me right now on that. And And then I think I'll put the senior housing portion of it separate, Mrs. Jukusa, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that motion?
The motion would be adding in at the end there where you're coming down to be 3.3. This memorandum of agreement would end. I know I use different words, but essentially this memorandum of agreement will end on December 31st, 2025, unless extended by mutual agreement of both parties.
Did you want to add the date for the master plan or? No.
I think that's going to be a function of people talking it out. I'm hoping that the committee and church will be able to move this along faster. I mean, to me, the first thing I would like to see personally is church getting into the Ann Hutchinson building and looking at it and go, you know what? The bones are good and we can work with this. Let's move forward as quick as we can. That would be my hope. And I think that's their hope as well, so that they can start earning some money to pay for the rest of the project. So, so is that okay, Ms. Abbott? You got that one?
Got it, thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to start with that one as the first motion, if I could, Mr. President.
We have a motion and a second. We can vote on it. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly? Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
And then my second motion would be to, on the second, whereas the town of Portsmouth has approached Church Community Housing Corporation, develop plans for the use of said properties for housing. After housing, can we put on, with an emphasis on senior housing?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre? I looked up this already.
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay. So we have, how do we need a motion on?
Yeah, I move we vote to approve the memorandum of understanding
As amended.
as amended.
I will second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Huh?
Can you say that one more time, please?
Aye. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
Sounded like you had laryngitis.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay. There we have it. So we're all set on that item.
Just to button it all up, and Ms. Ujifusa said it earlier, that despite some of the discussion that's been out there and what's been heard tonight, we do very much care for all of our seniors. And we care about our buildings. I was in the same party as Andrew, trying to make sure that we kept the chapel, but unfortunately that came down.
And I'd like to reiterate that the MOU really, basically commits us not to sell the properties to another developer while Church Community Housing is looking at how to develop them. It also does not prevent us from continuing to find temporary quarters for the seniors. All it does is it gives us a way to look at these two properties and how to make the best use of them. Again, there were several comments during this conversation that this can has been kicked down the road. We're attempting to quit kicking it. It's time to do something about it, as Mr. Buttermeyer said. And I think this is a very good first step to find out what is the optimal use for these properties. It does not solve all of our problems, but it does not prevent us from looking at solutions to those problems either.
To that point, Mr. Ryan, Dr. Ryan, yes, the can has been kicked down the road, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but we have not neglected that building and not neglected the seniors. There's been a lot of money put into it to maintain that building. Could it have been done better? Sure. Had I known in 2008 that it needed a sprinkler system, that it was going to be shut down if it didn't have it, we would have put the sprinkler system in, but it needed a roof, it needed repointed bricks, it needed windows, it needed bathrooms, it needed boilers, it needed air conditioning, it needed, I'm missing something else, but there was a lot of money and effort put into that building, and
And the town had
least
many
of
of
which
the
was a lot
buildings
of
that
fire
also
stuff.
needed attention.
Yep.
Right.
So
That's why the Jacobs report was done. We now kind of have a better idea as to the totality of the problems that we're facing with the town properties. So this is a very good first step at addressing some of them.
Okay, well, thank you all.
thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. That was a lengthy discussion, but it was meaningful, and hopefully we are on the path to addressing some of these issues. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we are moving on to our next item, which is resolution supporting Senate Bill 64, an act relating to motor and other vehicles automated traffic speed enforcement system. This one, I asked this to be put on. As many of the councilors know, this is an item that Senator Sevigny has been working on and is looking for support, council support via a resolution. If this bill is passed, it will allow the town and other towns additional resources to help curb speeding. Speeding is one of our primary concerns along East Main and West Main Road. This legislation would give us another tool in that fight against speeding along our corridors. So I thought it was worthy of getting this resolution put together, and I ask for your support tonight. Do I need to read it, or has everyone read it? Dr. Ryan, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. It's probably better that way most times. I think we've all read it, and yeah, I would move to approve the resolution as submitted.
Hand raised in the other.
We have a hand raised.
Want to get a second first?
Mr. President, I'll second it for discussion. And if I may,
sure.
I don't think I can support this. I don't like people being ticketed by faceless machines. It's being abused in Providence, and not that our police department would abuse it. I know we have a very professional police department, but it's being abused to the fact that Pawtucket is giving out tickets during school time in Pawtucket, and they're not even in session. They're all distance learning. So I could see other communities abusing this, and I can't support this because it's just raise the fines or take away people's licenses, but automated speed traps are just, they're not a viable solution to me.
Thank you. I know Mr. Fitzmaurice is trying to just get to that screen. Mr. Fitzmaurice?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would agree with Mr. Hamilton. I don't think that Portsmouth is the right community for automated ticketing system for two reasons. Number one, the obvious objection, even in Providence, to this thing. They fought hard against this, but the city found it to be such a lucrative source of revenue, although clearly they're challenged on revenue, that they forced it back on them. And just read off the numbers. I did some research. There are 33 red light cameras. There are 21 systems for speed regulation, in other words, the sort of thing we're doing. And for some reason, they have 3 license plate surveillance systems. So obviously, they're about 10 times the size of us. I don't think that that's going to come to us, but this is well deployed in Providence. It will be here too if we get started. One of the important things I would emphasize is that Mr. 70's bill, which I have read, covers town roads as well. And maybe not this council, but some council in the future is going to find it irresistible to put these things up on town roads. And the issue is clearly that we don't need the money so bad that we have to get involved in these schemes. It's just not suitable for our community. Another point is that we have very substantial privacy issues, concerns with this bill. These systems would produce digital photographs, which would be part of the public record, and you can, they would be destroyed after a while. But there's a stream of this. It's probably going to be managed either via the internet or via the cell phone systems. But either way, this stuff is streaming all over the place. And I think most of us have realized in the last 5 years that government surveillance, both the United States government and the Chinese, for instance, is pretty all-encompassing. So when we go to get a driver's license today in the state of Rhode Island, we have to not smile. And the reason is it messes up the facial recognition software. And facial recognition software is a requirement of these things. This bill requires a picture, a photograph, a digital photograph of the driver of the vehicle, as well as a digital photograph of the license plate from the rear end of the car. So we're talking about stuff that, this is way beyond the technical ability of the town to evaluate in terms of its risk to people's privacy. And we don't know where the limits of this thing lie. Once we get into this business, we don't know if we're going to get into cell phone interrogation and a database showing your travel all around town, or any number of other things I could discuss. It's not China, and we don't want Portsmouth to become China. I very strongly recommend that we don't support this. Mr. 70's bill is interested in many regards, but this is something that the assemblies, past and present, have rejected on a number of different occasions because of their issues relative to the privacy of our citizens. And we all know that when we go on Facebook or Google or whatever, that they're using an awful lot of our information. But more and more in our country, we're concerned about that sort of thing. And it's not a partisan issue. It comes from both sides of the political divide. So I think we need to think long and hard before we start asking the assembly to pass these things. And I might note that these memorandums, especially coming from Portsmouth, are going to have some weight up at the assembly. And I like not to see this thing passed. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Ms. Simon?
Well, let me start by saying I appreciate the input. I mean, part of the process here is to get legislation moving through the process so that it will solicit comment. Obviously, it's been successful so far in doing that. I wouldn't go so far as to say we're approaching a circumstance that was comparable to China or elsewhere. We do have a problem that's been raised through the safety audit. We now know that the facts from that audit indicate that we can't have a road diet, so we can't use that as a traffic calming device. What I will say is that some of these issues have been raised already, and there'll probably be some changes coming. So, it's perfectly okay with me if you want to hold off. I mean, there are going to be some changes. I will very directly tell you that the legislative intent is not for this to be a revenue generating device. The problems that happened with Providence, I think, were mismanagement more than, bad intent. But I would like to see the legislation move forward with some changes. We expect to see some changes from RIDOT. I mean, I don't know what to say about how the camera systems will work. We'll have to look at that. I mean, at this point, all I'm looking for is the opportunity for any municipality to have a tool it can choose to use or not use. That would be determined by their town council or city council, a traffic calming methodology. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, what's just as important as a camera is the sign a quarter of a mile up the road that says, hey, we're going to take your picture, or a picture of your license plate, however that works out, and you will be fined if you speed. Okay, I mean, I'm looking for a solution for West Main Road as well as East Main Road, and at the end of this process, if the bill does come to pass, it's still up to the town to decide what to do or not do. Some of the other things, we can take a look at language that quells some of the more extreme fears, concerns. I don't think anyone is interested in creating, that sort of surveillance state. But this came from the fruits of our road safety audit, and if the town wants me to pursue it, I will continue to pursue it. I will probably bring some changes forward. Part of the process here is to get RIDOT to take this seriously. We expect to see some perhaps improvements, so I can bring those back to you. But at the end of the day, I will leave it in your hands. If you don't pass a resolution, I'm probably just going to pull the bill. So you guys need to think it over and decide, whether or not this is a tool that you think will help the town. I do. I think we can work around some of the concerns that were raised. It might take a little more work. It might take a little more legislative language. But at the end of the day, you guys need to tell me whether to proceed or not. And I don't know if Rep. is on, but we'll work this together to make sure that to the degree that we can satisfy some of the concerns, we implement changes to the bill that you think are appropriate. And if you don't, then don't pass a resolution, and I'll pull the bill. Fair enough?
Mr. President, may I ask a couple questions of Senator Stephanie?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So cameras are currently allowed in school zones, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not like this technology isn't being used. Your proposal is to just expand its use.
Right.
And
There's
secondly,
there's 7 or 8 states too, that, that where their processes are modeled from this. The ones I'm most familiar with, don't take a picture of the person in the car, they take a picture of the license plate. And oh, by the way, we're on the topic of getting your picture taken. You better not go through the toll gates, because there's cameras everywhere taking your picture. I don't know what those controls are over that stuff, but it's something certainly that we can explore with this legislation.
And
Yeah.
have you spoken to our,
Go ahead.
just wondering if you've spoken to our police chief and what his opinion
yeah.
is on this?
Well, he's on. I mean, he can tell you himself, but I believe he supports it.
Chief Peters, are you on?
Hello, yes. I have spoken with 770 about this, and I do support this project. I believe that there were safeguards that were put into this bill. So when 770 had looked at this, for instance, if someone was going 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, the fine for that is roughly $252, give or take, if you were stopped by a police officer and given the full amount for that ticket. This wasn't a revenue generating bill that was put forward. I believe Senator 70 can correct me, but I believe it's just going to be a flat fee of $50 no matter what speed you are going. And the intent, as it's put forward, is just to have another tool to have a deterrent where individuals would be something to get them to have their speeds under control. So whatever city they're going through, they would have the warning power, the signs would be put in place that they would know, hey, up ahead, there's going to be the speed cameras and to watch your speeds. And that was the hope behind this bill. And Senator 70 came forward, and I do support as just another tool in the toolbox to do what we can to make the roadways more safer here in Portsmouth.
And have you seen this work in other communities, Chief Peters?
Well, the bill, right now in Rhode Island, this capability doesn't exist. So we have seen it just in the school zones, and they have the red light cameras that was brought up. So this would be something new that Rhode Island would have, that you could have these speed zones outside the school zone and outside the traffic lights.
But do you believe that it's worked in other communities outside of Rhode Island?
From what I have read, yes, that I have seen that there is success as far as traffic calming measures. I mean, when people see these signs, or they know that they're going to be getting tickets, I mean, I know, if you go up to Providence and you see a traffic camera in front of you, and you know that if you go through that red light, people are more apt to stop, and they're going to make sure that when that light turns yellow, they're actually stopping at that yellow because they're afraid of that ticket. That's a deterrent of going through it. And the same thing would be if they're going through communities that have this capability. That's the deterrent, that they're going to keep their speeds under control. And hopefully with the speeds under control, it's going to be more safer roadways if people are going the actual speed limits that the roadways were designed for.
Yeah, and we've done a lot of work with the RIDOT Traffic Safety Division. Steve Pristawa, who is the chief engineer, the safety engineer, has looked this over, and it's still going through some of their more senior people. So there could be some changes. We expect, sometime this week to see what those changes might look like. Certainly people have raised concerns regarding abuse to raise revenue or or that kind of thing. But there's lots of data out there that the traffic safety folks have looked at from other states, indicate that this kind of thing can work as a deterrent to speeding, especially, you know, in circumstances like us where we have essentially, you know, throughways that are, you know, taking high-speed traffic right through our neighborhoods for all intents and purposes. You know, well, I'll get back to you. You know, Terry and I are meeting with RIDOT later this week, and we'll see what other changes may come that they would be recommending to the legislation, and we'll see where it goes. I think that generally speaking, I would ask for the town's support to go through this, because if we can't do a road diet and we don't have a way to make the point to people in a way that they will clearly understand that we're not going to tolerate the high speeds on East and West Main roads, I don't have another idea. I would suggest to you that from a budgetary standpoint, widening the roads and doing some of the more heavy infrastructure changes, it could be in the cards out there, but it's a long way off. So, I mean, all that said, you don't necessarily have to make a decision tonight, because there are probably changes that we're going to have to deal with in the near term. So there might be changes to the bill, but I would like an indication from this council that you want us to continue pursuing the concept, and we'll do our best to try to quell the concerns and fears that there's abuse or there's an invasion of privacy. And we'll do our best to, try to mitigate some of that stuff. But I would like to hear from you tonight if you're behind this as a concept, even if we've got to knock off some rough edges to the legislation. So I'll let it go there.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Abbott, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I actually agree with Mr. Hamilton on this. I'm not in favor of traffic cameras. I actually grew up in a city where they were all over the place, and they just ended up kind of being a joke. Everybody that lived in town knew exactly where they were, so you slam on the brakes before you pass where the camera is, and then you speed that back up. They just seem like a trick and a gimmick. Maybe they, statistically lower speeds, but I think the trade-offs with regards to visual pollution and privacy and all the other concerns that have been raised are not worth the trade-off. What we're talking about is there's no options on the table, so we have to turn the highway through our town into a circus with flashing lights to tell people to slow down, flashing lights for people to cross, sidewalks, guardrails, and big yellow signs that people drive too slow. I think that's just a pretty clear indication that it's a bad design and we need a fundamental change. And I don't think that that traffic cameras are a worthwhile pursuit. I would rather have us expend energy on finding making progress on the real long-term solutions for East Main Road, even if they are, a very long-term plan.
Okay. All right. So let me just circle back. Oh, wait, we've got,
Ms. Corcoran did have her hand first.
all right, so let's go to Representative Corcoran.
Hi, good evening. Thank you.
I'm just listening to the conversation. I welcome the input. I have legislation drafted, but we did become aware late last week of some changes DOT wanted, so we're waiting to get back with them. So I haven't actually submitted mine, but I am interested in getting a sense if you're supportive or not of the idea. We did also talk to the Coalition for Traffic Safety, and they were supportive of the idea. So, but we, it's really about what you all want us to do. So I look forward to the rest of the conversation, and I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet. And then let's just circle back to Mr. Fitzmaurice.
Thank you, Mr. President. A real quick comment. Ms. Abbott has pretty much made the case, but I would like to suggest that, well, I'd like to ask, is there any plan for the number of cameras along West Main and East Main Road?
I can honestly say no.
I would suggest that we're going to see a fairly large number of cameras along each one of those state highways in order to make this work. If you got one, everybody will know where it is. They'll slow down to 40 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour is appropriate, and then they accelerate up. So we're talking about a lot of machines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fitzmaurice. I mean, at this point, I think what Senator Sevigny and Representative Cordovan are looking for is, from the council's perspective, because we've heard that the resolutions are probably going to be modified. I think they're really looking for just our, each councilor's level of support. I think we've heard from a couple of councilors that are kind of opposed to it. I personally, hearing from the chief of police and some of the other information that Senator Sevigny provided, these are just additional tools, resources that can help supplement, our enforcement of East Main and West Main Road. We're not here tonight to say we're going to put up 10, 15 cameras. We may never even put up a camera because it would be a council decision as to how we would, roll something out. But I think just having the ability or flexibility to support our police in the enforcement of both East Main and West Main Road at a minimum. Those are the roads that have the highest speeds and are roads that, need additional help. So personally, I favor of supporting it. I don't think we need correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we need a council vote tonight. I think because the legislation is going to change or potentially change, I think what they want is to hear, would we be supportive of it? I am supportive of it. Mr. Sevigny, and Representative Cordovan, is it okay if we just each voice our concern or our support or for it or against it? Would that give you what you need for your benefit?
I'll ask Chief Peters.
There's already been a motion to approve, and it's been seconded.
Well, it's going to change. So are you concerned about any of the potential language changes? I mean, you're opposed to it, so I don't think you.
I'm not concerned what it says. If it, as long as it says we're not going to put up traffic cameras, I'm fine with it.
Mr. President, I move the question. Let's vote.
Okay. Mr. Kelly?
I have a question for Chief Peters.
Okay.
Why don't we have a speed cam at Melville School?
Is that because it's a state road?
No,
Do we need,
if it's allowed, I'm curious.
I don't know.
That is, that's something that the town council could look into. If the town council would like to put a traffic camera there, but it'd have to be in conjunction with the state because it is a state road. So I believe you'd have to get state permission as well. But as for why we haven't done one, I do not have an answer for you.
Okay, well then let's just go back to the original. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Nay.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Nay.
Mr. Hamilton?
Nay.
Mr. Kelly?
Nay.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. However, the motion fails. 3-4. So,
That was the weirdest.
that's okay. I mean,
So the motion failed on the resolution?
motion failed on the resolution.
We'll, presuming then that there aren't any changes that are going to satisfy the council, go ahead and pull the bill.
Well, thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we weren't successful tonight, but thank you for your efforts.
Sure. That's the process.
Okay. All right. We're gonna move on to our next item, item number 3. It's the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee report. Mr. White?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Theodore Peace, the chair of the Solid Waste Recycling Study Committee. Is my audio coming in good for you?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so next slide, please. If you're able to jump to the next slide. The committee has 10 members, all of whom are very insightful. I am pleased to present to you tonight our collective observations. A little bit of background on the work the committee has done in the last few years. We have been involved with the townwide survey that was done in the summer of 2017. There were almost 1,000 respondents to that survey. And it was interestingly enough with that survey, most of those respondents used the transfer station, but it was split on the preference for transportation or curbside pickup. We also presented an analysis of costs, municipal solid waste and recycling in Portsmouth at a town workshop in August of 2017. That was before the vote for pay-as-you-throw, which was implemented by the town council in 2017. The recycling rate in the town has skyrocketed from 20% to 35% for our municipal recycling program, which is great news. We were always outside of the scope of getting rebates from Vivint, and now we're getting full rebates, and we're one of the top performers in the state of Rhode Island, which is fantastic. The kudos for that goes to our recycling coordinator, Ray Antaya. He is instrumental to our successes here in the town of Portsmouth. And I just wanted to let you know that all of the meeting minutes and agendas are available on the Open Minutes dashboard from the Rhode Island Secretary of State, and we keep pretty good records of our analysis over the years. So the culmination of some of this analysis breaks down into this presentation tonight. So next slide, please. The proposed objectives listed are pretty simple and self-explanatory. We want to do 3 things. We want to reduce the cost of living and doing business in Portsmouth. Secondly, the goal is to increase the rate of diversion from the waste stream townwide. The Vivint landfill is reaching capacity. The date always changes, but it's probably within 10 years or maybe in the early 2030s, our central landfill will actually be full. So the more that we can divert now and we can keep a high diversion rate, the longer we can continue with the Vivint landfill. So it's very, very important because the cost will absolutely skyrocket once that landfill is full. The tipping fees will probably continue to rise accordingly. It's not exciting, but I'll get to the tipping fees in a later slide. And the last thing is there's a lot of illegal dumping going on in Portsmouth, or maybe there's just social media attention, but we all know that, you know, if someone had the mattress or some old tires, we don't want them to think, oh, maybe I'll just go to Melville or Burma Road and just chuck it out, you know, off the side of the road. We want people to focus on a positive way to, or a town-sanctioned way to dispose of that trash, regardless if you're a resident that using the transportation, or we need to think about that, the right answer for that question. But right now, the volunteer citizens are spending their free time or some of their free time picking up trash because we all want to live in a beautiful town. We're all very proud of Portsmouth, and we do not want to see our Department of Public Works, instead of working on other more pressing matters, picking up the remnants of illegal dumping here in town. So next slide, please. This slide is talking about our transfer station, the current model for the sanctioned municipal solution here in Portsmouth. The current 3.5-year transfer station contract, as you all very well may know, is quickly moving towards the renewal option phase, with the first of 2 one-year options coming up in June 30th of this year. That's actually coming up very quickly. In summary, this slide, we just wanted to show you something that's very simple. Folks are voting here in Portsmouth with their wallets, and the downward trend in sticker sales is unmistakable, with just 1 of 3 Portsmouth households purchasing a transport station sticker in the past calendar year. Next slide, please. For the cost analysis, this slide is just what I'm trying to show here on this slide is that a lot of residents are going it on their own. They're contracting for curbside pickup. Typically in large municipalities similar to Portsmouth, there's a town-wide solution for curbside, and we lose out on that economy to scale. The best known promotional rate offered to Portsmouth residents is $384 a year, and maybe another 10% discount if you pay a year in advance. Other private plans that I'm aware of are in excess of well over $400 a year for weekly curbside pickup. For the transfer station, the sticker fee, every year it has gone up, and it has risen significantly. If you look at what it was in 2015, we did not need pay-as-you-throw to supplement the transfer station revenue. To now, it is almost 133% increase if you're just using one $2 bag a week. So obviously, pay-as-you-throw is driving people to divert the waste and lower the cost. But the pay-as-you-throw revenue really is the lifeblood of paying off that fixed contract to run the transfer station. In comparison to Middletown, Middletown has been able to keep their curbside bin stickers flat. Middletown implemented pay-as-you-throw solution, the same price, $2 for that one bag a week, or that one large bag. And if you're looking at it, if you break it down, if you have an average of one bag a week, if you lived in Middletown, you're paying $70 a year less than Portsmouth for a transfer station user. And then if you're going it on your own for a curbside solution, it's probably $250 less a year. So right now, we're getting stoked. So that is the cost analysis slide. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this is the tipping fee slide. Another factor that's leading to the collective squeeze here in Portsmouth is the rising private tipping fee. The reason that I spoke to earlier in this presentation is that the central landfill has rising operational costs. The cost of doing business rises year to year, and the recycling marketplace is getting more and more muddy, with China increasingly rejecting recyclables for the United States due to contaminated load. That being said, Vivint reports that they have buyers for all the recyclables that they receive. But the fees are also slowly being raised to incentivize the fact that the landfill is going to be full soon, and they're trying to extend the life of the landfill. So if you put a bigger sticker price or a tag on throwing away garbage, the hope is that people will be more aggressive about diversion programs in their respective municipalities in Rhode Island. Something that people may not realize, that if you are a commercial hauler and you are just going to buy it with a typical contract, that you're paying almost $100 a ton. That is double the rate that commercial hauler would be paying if they were officially contracted through that municipality. So in a way, that's the way that curbside pickup customers in Portsmouth are paying even more than they would typically. Next slide, please. So quickly, I just wanted to point out something about this slide before I get some angry phone calls from trash haulers. When I said residents only, I meant that those companies are available to residents. Certainly, some of those companies provide service to businesses as well here in Portsmouth. But right now, we have 8 private haulers observed as operating in Portsmouth. And as we know, maybe have trash runs different days of the week. You know, up to 8 different trucks going down the same town road instead of maybe just 1 or 2. That is additional wear and tear. That's an indirect cost. It doesn't show up on any spreadsheet, but that is the cost that we are all incurring. And it is being reflected in higher taxes because we need to get our roads fixed more often. And additionally, there's more congestion and CO2 emission. When a truck is running on, you know, East Main Road, we talk a lot about the state roads are very congested, and when the trucks need to make these runs, they are stopping or slowing traffic. It is a hazardous situation that's being incurred more than what is typical. Next slide, please. This slide is the proposed way ahead. In closing, if there is just one thing that you can take away from tonight's presentation and what we wanted to impress upon the town council tonight, is the lack of a comprehensive town-wide solution for everybody for solid waste and diversion disposal options here in Portsmouth mean that our taxpayers are getting crushed on multiple fronts by higher costs directly and indirectly. Now, it certainly takes time to line up a comprehensive solution that can touch on everything that residents and businesses want, but I would recommend getting that ball rolling tonight. Thank you.
I was muted? No, I was muted. Go ahead, Linda. Is it?
Oh, I was just going to say, I wanted to thank Ted and the committee for all their years of looking at all these issues. And I just feel like it's a really timely presentation because it's important for the town council to understand how many issues we are facing and have to be decided. And we shouldn't wait till the last minute because the contract with our current providers is going to be coming up in, what is it, Ted? June of 2022, right? Or 2021 with an extension.
Yeah, we're in the last year of the contract, and there's 2 one-year extensions mutually agreed on by both parties. So I think finally this is the time that we have to start looking at this.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it was a very contentious discussion before, but I believe that you guys are bringing to the table so many facts and reasoned arguments, or that it's really going to help us move through and choose a good option going forward. I just want to tell everybody that the issues that your committee is dealing with is not just a simple top line curbside or transfer station. I mean, some of the underlying issues are what is the cost to all the individuals in town? You know, what's fair? Is it just based on what people want to do, or shouldn't it be based on spreading the costs fairly? And also, you guys have to look at the pros and cons of putting it into the tax base. You guys, we've asked you to look into what, what it would cost to go curbside with Middletown even, or what are we going to do with trash and recyclables and compostables? It's a lot of moving parts to this. And I personally would like to see you guys make recommendations, because you've been studying this so much, as to how the town should move forward. And we can just all, make a decision way ahead of time. So thank you. And that's what I would request, Mr. President, is that the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee come back to the town council with recommendations about how we should move forward.
Any other comments? Council?
Yeah, I would like to thank Ted and the entire committee for the work that they're doing. It's actually a pleasure to sit there and listen to these things be debated. And as Councilor Giuffus said, it is really a very complicated issue. Not only is there trash, we have recyclables, we have yard waste. I mean, there's a lot of things that could potentially be disposed of in different ways. And I think Councilor Giuffus is right. We should really have overall analysis as to how this can be done most efficiently at least cost for the people in the town. So I would be very interested in seeing another set of recommendations from the committee that we could mull over, and the people in the town could consider as well.
Do we have a time frame for when the next recommendations might be available or come before the council? Is that something you've been working on at this point?
Well, the committee is actively working on and looking at these issues. It would be probably like a month out at the fastest timeline, because we would definitely want to reconvene at our February meeting and then go through what we would like to recommend to the town council. We have a general idea, but if you gave us another month, and then we'd be more than happy to reappear in front of the town council and give you more pointed recommendations. We developed that opportunity.
Okay. So possibly the second meeting in March 22nd, or our first meeting in April 12th. One of those meetings. Why don't you meet with your committee and then give us a heads up, and we'll try to get you scheduled. I mean, we should be able to get you scheduled in second meeting in March or the first meeting in April. Much better time frame from your committee. Does that sound fair? I don't think we need any action tonight, other than if you regroup on your end and come back to us end of March or early April.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you. Okay. On to new business number 4, ratification of appointment of finance director. Mr. Rayner.
Yes, Mr. President, in accordance with the Portsmouth Town Charter, Article 3, Section 304C, I hereby submit my request for your ratification of the appointment of Ms. Lisa Lasky of Bristol, Rhode Island, as our finance director. With the announcement of Lisa Mills's resignation, Human Resources began the selection process for the new finance director. We received 26 applications. Each candidate was screened for conformity to minimum qualifications, and 3 candidates were ultimately invited to interview. Each candidate would have been a superb choice for Portsmouth, but I ultimately have decided to bring forward Ms. Lasky as my choice for finance director. She is an accountant, has an active CPA license, is a member of the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of Rhode Island. She has served as chief financial officer in both the corporate and government realms, and she is adept in all fields of financial management. Most recently, she has served as chief finance officer for the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. I am convinced that Ms. Lasky possesses the educational background, professional experience, and moral integrity to successfully lead our finance department, and I respectfully ask for the town council's concurrence. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Hamilton?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay. We have correspondence.
Receive and
Move to receive and place on file.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Hamilton?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Passes. Next, we have future meetings. Next regularly scheduled meeting, February 22nd, March 8th, March 22nd, and April 12th for our next regularly scheduled council.
Take motion.
Mr. President,
Oh.
Somebody say something.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Mrs. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott? Mr. Buttermeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Thank you all. Good evening, and we will see you on the 22nd.
Good night, all.
Good night, all.
Good night.